France bringing the retirement age back down to 60. Elena, what are the newspapers made of this?
Well, first we should probably point out that before we have a look at Le Figaro's front page, this move does only apply to about 100,000 people. It only applies if you were born between 1952 and 58 and you started working at 18 or 19. That is not what you would think, though, if you read Le Figaro's editorial this morning. They've got "The France turns its back on Europe" as a headline today, and they say in their editorial that 1 in 3 people could be affected, which is not true, but nevertheless, for them this is a perfect opportunity to attack the new government, saying they're ignoring the economic reality all across Europe and spending money fulfilling election pledges, which they describe as economic heresy. So they're furious, really, but they do point out also that François Hollande may not be able to fulfil all of his other election promises on financial terms. There just isn't enough money. There's an interesting piece in Les Echos today which say that actually he's going to copy a lot of Sarkozy's economic policies, or at least not revoke them. After all, this change made to the pension reform that was carried out by Sarkozy 2 years ago is really very marginal when you consider the scope of the change that was brought in by Sarkozy. What Le Figaro wants is for the entire country to see its pensions go back up to 67, which is what's happening in Germany. People are being forced to retire then. The chances of that happening in France are fairly marginal. If you can imagine how the French would react if you told them to retire at 67.
Not likely.
No, remember the protest we had 2 years ago, and it was raised just from 60 to 62. But the important points being made by Les Echos, François Hollande may not do something quite as drastic as that, but he is going to find it difficult to actually fulfil all of the cash promises that he made before the election.
Now, this is all being debated, of course, just as parliamentary elections are about to happen. This Sunday, in fact, is all hotting up, isn't it? Just in time for them.
Yes, it really is. Le Parisien is having a look at this. They say inside that while the left can probably still expect to get a majority in the Assemblée Nationale, it's going to be a fairly narrow one. And why is that? Well, because they expect turnout to be very low, because the French are just fed up of coming out to vote. This system of having parliamentary elections in 2 rounds, 6 weeks after we had a presidential election in 2 rounds, does mean voter fatigue sets in, and lots of people, especially in more working class sectors of society and more rural areas where people are a bit less politically engaged, it means they're even less likely to bother to go out and vote yet again. They do point out in Le Parisien that maybe it might weaken the Front National, because those are the people who are the most likely to vote for them, who are perhaps the most likely to be fed up of voting over and over again. They also might weaken the UMP, who are already finding it difficult to try and grab back some political control after François Hollande's victory. Le Parisien points out that those candidates that were backed by Sarkozy are also finding in lots of areas, even his own fief of the wealthy west of Paris, that they're being contested by other candidates on the right who might have similar policies to Sarkozy but who reject his kind of style that made him so unpopular. So they're finding themselves very divided, can't quite agree with one another among those different forces on the right. The socialists not necessarily having an easy time as well. They've got to contend with Green candidates that they're linked to, but some socialists are running against Green candidates in different constituencies, despite the electoral agreement between the parties. Then, of course, there's the Front National, the big force going on here, the big power force. There's an interesting article in Slate today going to the place where Marine Le Pen picked up her highest vote on the 22nd of April in Picardy. They try and explain why that is, because it's a kind of sub-rural area stuck between Paris and Calais with no big cities, no infrastructure, no doctors, no train stations. People feel that they've been deserted, really, by the power that has its forces in the big cities of France. Marine Le Pen herself, though, may not necessarily get that seat that she so desperately wants in the Pas-de-Calais in the north of France. They might not get any seats at all, especially if people don't turn out. And she herself is getting some news coverage today. She's been particularly litigious this week. Remember, a couple of days ago she was going to sue Madonna. Now today she's apparently going to sue Bernard-Henri Lévy for having alleged that she may have been behind some anti-Semitic attacks, or that she may have encouraged them.
Elena, thanks very much. That's Elena with the French newspapers here on France 24. Now let's have a look at the headlines.